What's going on, guys? It's Horse Beef here, bringing you another tier list, and this is the one that I've been looking forward to making the most. Today, we are going to be ranking the greatest UFC fights of all time. Not all of MMA, otherwise this list would get out of hand. So I'm sticking to UFC fights. So Eddie Alvarez versus Michael Chandler, either of those fights will not be represented here. But we do have a pretty solid list, so let me know in the comments section below what you think of it, where you'd rank these. If you think I got some wrong, if you are disgruntled by where I've ranked any of these guys, feel free to insult me in the comment section below. So let's get into the first one. Wanderlei Silva versus Chuck Liddell, and I'm going to put this one in war. And remember, these are all ranked according to the others on this list. Every single one on this list is better than 99% of fights you'll watch in the UFC. So this is not to say that any of these fights are bad. If I rank them below other ones, it's just in comparison to the other greatest fights of all time. So keep that in mind here. So that's why I'm putting this one in war. It was a banger. The whole vibe surrounding this fight just makes me want to put it in barn burner. Just the fact that these two were out of their prime and they're so legendary. Every time a Shogun or a Wanderlei or a Chuck Liddell or even a Tito Ortiz would sign to fight, you were guaranteed a banger. It's why these guys all have CTE right now, but I am grateful for it. So you know what? I'm going to put it in barn burner because these two are such legends of the sport and titans of the sport, and they went to war the way they did. You're almost guaranteed a banger whenever these guys would fight, and I love it. Michael Chandler versus Justin Gaethje, I'm going to put it in the same category. Another 3-round battle. Michael Chandler came on strong in the first. I thought won the first round, had Justin Gaethje hurt on multiple occasions. I believe he threw like a crazy flying knee at one point, was just slinging overhands, juicy leg kicks. And in the second round, Justin Gaethje comes on and turns the tables a little bit and then wins the third and does ultimately win the fight by unanimous decision. And even though the action doesn't really persist on the same level as round one, there are still those iconic moments throughout every single round that puts this fight up at barn burner. Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen. I'm actually going to put this one bottom tier, touch butt in the park, because it was a one-sided battle. Pretty much just Chael Sonnen doing everything he wanted to Silva, which made no sense. I remember watching this fight live as the biggest Anderson Silva fan, almost being brought to tears as a child, watching my favorite fighter be dominated like that. But then to sink in that triangle in the dying moments of the fight, wow, what a moment. But this fight, I think, in comparison to the rest, deserves to be bottom tier because it is too one-sided for me. Then we have our first slobber knocker of the list here. Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald is a legendary fight. This moment right here where Robbie spits the blood out and then stares down Rory, and then Rory stays there and stares him down, and they just have this primal moment where both men are looking each other in the eyes with mutual respect but also animosity. Incredible. Rory was actually on his way to winning this fight. I thought he kept finding the head kicks against Robbie, rocking him, and then Robbie, you'd think he's out of it. Next thing you know, he's throwing big combinations off the back foot, with his back against the fence, having moments of his own, busting up Rory McDonald's nose, and eventually finishing the fight in the 5th round because of the accumulative damage to that nose of Rory. He just couldn't take it anymore. Wow. What a fight. This is one of my favorites of all time. I think if you ask most MMA fans who have seen this fight, majority of them would say that this is at least a top 5 fight in UFC history. And we get into Gilbert Melendez versus Diego Sanchez. I do think it's a banger. I'm going to put it in banger, actually. It's a solid fight. Incredible back and forth war. Majority of the time, it was Gilbert Melendez having success. And then in the 3rd round, Diego Sanchez came back and then dropped Gilbert and had a moment where he could finish the fight. Wasn't able to do it. But it's a banger, right? Like, you can't really deny that this fight is incredible. Justin Gaethje versus Eddie Alvarez. Wow, what a fight this was. Justin, for the most part, was chewing up Alvarez's legs, while Alvarez was having more success with the hands, and eventually dropping Justin Gaethje in, it was the 4th round with a knee in the clinch, dropping him, finishing the fight. It is great. I'm going to put it in war. It's pretty much impossible to rank a Justin Gaethje fight below war, right? And then we get into Carlos Condit versus Robbie Lawler. Excellent fight. Although because it's a robbery, and because, realistically, this fight, other than the moments that Robbie Lawler had where he dropped Carlos on one occasion, I believe in the 2nd round, and then he did have moments in the 5th where he was really trying to pour on the pressure to steal the fight. Carlos was still robbed in this one, which I think maybe has me rank it a little bit lower. I'm going to put it in banger. It is a great fight, although the robbery decision and the general one-sidedness of the fight in Carlos's favor has me put it a little bit lower. But because Robbie had big moments of his own and made the case for him to win certain rounds, I will say banger for sure. Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Weili Zhang. I'm putting this in slobber knocker. This is one of the best fights I've ever seen. I remember watching this fight. I believe it was the last card before COVID. And it was followed up by one of the worst fights of all time, which we might do a tier list about that in Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero. But this fight delivered nonstop pace, one of the craziest paces I've ever seen in a 5-round fight, and both these ladies kept it up until the very end. There's nothing more to say about it. It is a slobber knocker, absolutely. Vicente Luque versus Brian Barberena, very underrated fight, I would say too. But I'm going to put it in banger. It was relatively one-sided for Brian Barberena. He kept hurting Vicente Luque, and then Vicente found, I believe it was a knee that put Brian down in the 3rd round and finished him. What a turnaround. This version of Vicente Luque was prime Vicente Luque. You really just the same as Justin Gaethje. He was essentially the welterweight version of Justin Gaethje. Every fight of his was a slugfest, and you were guaranteed entertainment every time. Unfortunately, he's not the same anymore, and Brian Barberena is now cut from the UFC. So 2 absolute warriors, either not the same as they once were, not even in the UFC anymore. So yeah, I want to commemorate this fight, but I'm going to put it only in banger. Yuri Prochazka versus Dominic Reyes. Now, this is an incredible fight. I actually want to put it in barn burner because as short as it lasted, I believe it only went to like the middle or the end of the 2nd round. But while the action was happening, we had a back and forth battle. Reyes would stun Yuri with a left hand, put him on wobbly legs. Yuri would recover and then come back and start piecing up Reyes against the fence. Just brutally beat him, and to cap it off with the knockout, that I believe is a right elbow, and then uses the momentum to spin into a spinning elbow, putting Dominic Reyes out cold. It's one of the most ominous knockouts I've ever witnessed. I remember witnessing it, and I couldn't speak for about 7 to 8 minutes after watching the fight. I was completely stunned, and the action, the fact that it was so back and forth leading up to that finish. I love this fight. I really do. It's a barn burner for me, and it's one of those bite-sized fights that you can just watch and be completely fulfilled by. If you ever need to watch a fight, you want entertainment, watch this fight. It's crazy action. Korean Zombie versus Dustin Poirier. I believe this is one of those back and forth wars that actually didn't favor Dustin Poirier because Korean Zombie submitted Dustin in this fight, but the action leading up to the submission was so high level and so entertaining. I would say it deserves to be in war. This is a crazy, crazy fight. Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier. This is number 2. I will put it in banger because it's a heavyweight fight and both guys were slugging it out the way that they were. Stipe was having like no success for the opening 3 rounds, and then when he found that left hook to the body, made the adjustment, it became more back and forth, and then turning the tables and finishing DC. Incredible fight. Another one of those fights that I will never forget, the live experience of watching. Wow, this one was excellent, but because it was so one-sided, in favor of DC for a good part of it, maybe it just deserves to be in banger, but I can't put it as low as Touch Butt in the Park. Excellent fight. Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier, another fight that I'll never forget watching live. These two went to absolute war, even though once again it was quite one-sided. So because of the one-sided nature of it, because every single time Dustin would land one shot, he would stun Max, even though Max would land about 5 to 10 shots of his own, have no effect on Dustin. Because of that, it was hard to view this fight as an all-out war because it didn't seem like Dustin could really be affected much by Max's shots. But the action in this fight is undeniable. And it was the co-main event to another fight that will be on this list as well. So wow, incredible fight. I will put this one in war. I think it deserves to be in there because it is a 5-round banger. We did get the full 25 minutes of action, and we got exactly that in this fight. Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje 1. This is a similar fight to Eddie Alvarez versus Justin Gaethje, but I actually like this fight more. I'm going to put this one in barn burner The first one, the first fight between these two when they first met in the middle of the octagon, is my personal favorite between them. It's one of my favorite fights in general, I think. The leg kicks of Justin Gaethje and the commentary. I remember watching this fight, and the commentary was just completely focusing on the fact that Justin Gaethje was landing leg kicks. Meanwhile, every time Justin would land a leg kick, Dustin would piece him up with like 3 to 5 punches at a time that the commentary was just not acknowledging. But this fight is so good that, screw it, not even terrible commentary can take away from it. These two went to war. The late finish as well for Dustin Poirier. Oh, what a fight this is. I do rewatch it from time to time. We get into Pat Barry versus Chet Congo. Now, I feel like this is more of an S tier in terms of a comeback win, but it only lasts half a round. So I kind of have to put it in touch butt in the park. But the action that we got for that short time, I think like 2.5 minutes. If you've never seen this fight, I recommend going to watch it. But Pat Barry drops Chet Congo like 4 times. Looks like he's out of it. And then Chet Congo gets up, back against the fence, lands like 2 shots. I think a right hand followed by a left hook that puts Pat Barry out cold. Good riddance, Pat Barry. He's a groomer, but you didn't hear that from me. Clay Guida versus Diego Sanchez. This one has to be in slobber knocker, maybe. It is one of those iconic fights. Just out the gates, these two decided that they wanted to have a slugfest, and that is exactly what we got for the majority of this fight. It's a slobber knocker. It's legendary, the way I see it. Yancy Medeiros versus Cowboy Oliveira. This is a very underrated fight. The action in this one is crazy. I recommend watching this. This is one of those bangers that I feel like a lot of people haven't seen, and if you see it, this might even turn you around and make it to like the top of your favorite fights of all time, because this one is seriously underrated. I'm actually going to put this in barn burner. I think this fight is super good. High level action, wild exchanges, even grappling exchanges. We get suplexes, as you see in this picture. We get both guys getting dropped, both guys getting hurt. It is some serious shit. Alexander Gustafsson versus John Jones. I'm going to put this one in slobber knocker. It's one of the highest level fights that you will see. It's one of my favorite title fights of all time, meaning that it is one of my favorite fights of all time. I love it. Gustafsson having lots of success in those opening 3 rounds. Very high level exchanges. The counters of Gustafsson, the hands of him in general, some of the highest level boxing you will see. He was seriously having a lot of success in the opening 3, and being the first one to take down John Jones in this one. There's nothing to be ashamed of in this fight for Gustafsson. But then in the 4th and 5th, John Jones becoming a marauder and just walking down Gustafsson, landing his own shots, flying knees, elbows, both guys just showing absolute grit. I love this fight. It is a slobber knocker, absolutely. And then we get Irene Aldana versus Carol Rosa, a very recent one. And a complete banger. How is no one talking about this fight anymore? I guess because it's 2 ladies. People do like to ignore when ladies go at it and have a great fight. But the leg kicks from Carol Rosa looked like they had Aldana completely cooked in the first round. And then Aldana turns it around, starts landing her hands, and shows why she is a Mexican person. And just walking forward, boxing combinations, landing disgusting uppercuts. I love this fight. I'm going to put it in war. And we get Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. I think this is number 3, for sure. It deserves to be up here somewhere. What a fight. High-level grappling exchanges. Very, very entertaining exchanges on the feet. Brandon Moreno landing like long combinations on Davison just for Davison to land one big overhand and drop him. It had crazy moments. Throughout, it almost deserves to be in barn burner. Wasn't as good as their first fight, which will also be on this list, but it was up there for sure. I think I'll put this one. Ooh, it's a toughie. I'm putting in barn burner. It has to be up there. And we get into Shane Burgos versus Josh Emmett, another very underrated war. Juicy leg kicks from Burgos and some good boxing, but it was mostly the tale of Josh Emmett's overhands, landing them at will, and dropping Shane Burgos. And Shane is a madman. He's a madman. I'm very upset he's not in the UFC anymore. He's essentially like the featherweight Justin Gaethje or Vicente Luque, where every fight that you would sign for is guaranteed to be a banger, and this one was a banger. 3-round fight though, relatively one-sided with Josh Emmett dealing the majority of the impactful damage though, so I will keep this one. Wait, why? Okay, you know what? I'm actually moving this one up to war, and I'm going to bring this one down to banger. Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 2. I was thinking about putting Nate Diaz versus Conor 1 on this fight, but it didn't last long enough, really, and the action wasn't as exciting as this one. This one was pretty much Conor McGregor making the adjustments from the first fight, chewing up the leg, dropping Nate Diaz on a couple of occasions. It was relatively one-sided for the first 2 rounds. Then in the third round, Nate Diaz turns it around, wins the third and the fourth, and then the fifth round being the swing, where Conor McGregor also did get a second win. Oh man, this one, it's one fight I'll never forget. I'm happy to have a Conor McGregor fight on this list. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to put it in war. I do think that this one deserves to be in war. It's pushing barn burner, but I would say this one deserves to be in war. But it has a special place in my heart. I love that fight. Cub Swanson versus Do Ho Choi. I'm putting it right in Slobber Knocker. There's not a single other location where you can put this fight. It's one of the greatest fights of all time. It's for sure in my top 5 favorite fights of all time. The pace, the action, the wild exchanges. This fight has pretty much has it all except for high-level scrambles on the ground. Other than that, it doesn't matter, man. These two went to absolute war, hurting each other back and forth. Oh, I love this fight. If you've never seen it, please go out of your way to watch this one. It is incredible. And then we get another slobber knocker, maybe a little controversial here. Peter Yan versus Corey Sandhagen. This is one fight that I feel like maybe you guys might disagree with me on. Maybe if you don't appreciate high-level technique, you won't think this one deserves to be in slobber knocker. But it's, for me, one of my favorite fights of all time. Obviously, Peter Yan, as you know, is my favorite fighter. And this is my personal favorite performance of his. After the first round, he makes the adjustments and then starts to put on a clinic against Corey Sandhagen. But Corey Sandhagen was never was never out of the fight and was still throwing back shots of his own and displaying incredible technique. But the exchanges on the feet here between Peter Yan and Corey Sandhagen are some of the highest level exchanges you will ever see. The spinning back fist from Peter Yan that dropped Corey in fight 2. It's one of my favorite sequences I've ever seen, dude. Oh god, this fight. I do go back and watch it on like a bi-weekly to monthly basis. Absolute technical masterclass from Peter Yan in particular, but also Corey Sandhagen. What a fight. What a fight. I love it. Brandon Moreno versus Figueiredo. I am also going to put this one in slobber knocker. Upon watching this fight, I remember thinking, holy shit, I just witnessed one of the greatest fights of all time. And I feel like it isn't talked about enough in that regard these days. But pretty much any flyweight battle is going to be towards the top because you're guaranteed to get such high-level action at the very, very tippy top of flyweight. What a fight that is. The exchanges, the scrambles. This fight literally has it all. You cannot ask for any more than Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno 1. Paulo Costa versus Yoel Romero. I'm going to put this one in banger. The first round is worthy of being considered one of the best rounds of all time, but the action does slow down as both guys are absolutely jacked out of their minds. So they're eventually going to slow down, and they do slow down. The action does not persist at that first round level, so I will keep it at banger. Jose Aldo versus Chad Mendes. Sick fight. Sick fight. Another one of my favorite title fights of all time. Chad drops Aldo. Aldo comes back, drops Chad Mendes. The exchanges in this fight are incredible. The pace was incredible, and the stakes really, like both these guys would just exchange in the pocket and throw leather at each other, and it just seemed like either guy could get knocked out at any time. The toughness on both men displayed. I love this fight. I'm going to put it in barn burner. I love it. Chad Mendes versus Gray Maynard. I think this is the second one. Probably all their fights deserve to be on here, honestly, but I'm only going to focus on Chad Mendes versus Gray Maynard 2. It's hard to say this fight isn't a slobber knocker. The moments in it, Frankie Edgar getting dropped in the early rounds and then coming back, pouring it on. Dude, you can't ask for a lot more than this fight here. It's a slobber knocker. Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. The thing that keeps me from putting this fight towards the top of the list is the fact that it is quite one-sided. Volkanovski, for the most part, was outclassing Brian Ortega, but it was that moment where Ortega catches him in the guillotine, Volk fights out of it, and then catches him in the triangle choke, which is Brian Ortega's signature move. Volkanovski fights out of it. Those were the moments where Volkanovski had to fight adversity that made this fight a banger. But because it is one-sided for the most part. And then you have actually the fifth round where Brian Ortega is pushing the pace, walking forward and having success. Yes, this is a good fight, but it wasn't as back and forth and as much of a war as you might be led to believe. It was relatively one-sided, so I'm putting it in banger. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Slobberknocker. Mostly because this fight had no crowd, and you could hear the slaps of all of these punches landing on one another. Obviously, that second round alone is enough to put this fight up here. But the action, while it does slow down, because of course it would, after you see the pace of that second round, of course it was going to slow down. But you know what? The action doesn't remain as high octane as the second round did. So if we're talking about the greatest rounds of all time, round 2 between these two men is easily the greatest round of all time. If I think about it, really, I can't think of any rounds that would top it. But as a fight, as a complete fight, I will put it in barn burner. Robert Whittaker versus Yoel Romero 2. Sick fight. I think maybe doesn't deserve to go above war, even though the action is so high level. The pace does slow down after certain rounds where both guys really give everything that they have. So because the action doesn't persist and it doesn't have a consistent pace to it, but Robert does get dropped and then come back with an elbow and then a head kick, and this fight really does have some beautiful moments in it, and it is so back and forth. Maybe the robbery or the I don't know if it really is a robbery, but some people do consider this fight to be a robbery against Yoel Romero. I don't think it takes a lot away from it, but Yoel Romero did also miss weight, so it wouldn't have made a big difference anyway. So I just like to focus on what happened within the fight, and it's one of the greatest fights of all time. For sure, one of the greatest middleweight fights of all time and title fights of all time. Mark Hunt versus Bigfoot Silva. These are two heavyweights going to absolute war. Two heavyweights going to absolute war. It's one of the best fights of all time. It is my favorite heavyweight battle of all time. And I do go back and watch this fight every so often. And it's also one of those lesser known fights, especially for newer fans. Maybe you're not aware that these two put on one of the greatest showings that you'll ever see in your life. And honestly, one of the greatest displays of toughness you will ever see in the UFC, considering that these are heavyweights. Man, this fight, seriously, if you've never witnessed it, watch it in its entirety. Don't just watch the highlights. Watch every second of this fight, because it is up there, man. And then we get into Vanderlei Silva versus Brian Stann. There's a round in this fight. It might be the first round, or it could be the first or the second, where they are just exchanging with complete reckless abandon and dropping one another. I think there was a round here with like 5 or 6 knockdowns where both men drop each other on separate occasions. Whew, this is for sure at least a war. What a fight. Mateusz Gamrot versus Arman Tsarukyan. I wanted to represent high-level grappling, and I do love this fight. If I am in the mood to watch some high-level exchanges, grappling exchanges, this is the fight that I'll watch. And there are some good moments on the feet too. Arman drops Mateusz with a spinning back fist. I don't like the fact that this ended with the wrong man winning. I thought Arman won this fight personally, but I'll put it in banger. I do need to represent this fight. This is some of the highest level grappling you will witness in the UFC. Justin Gaethje versus Michael Johnson. I'm putting this one in barn burner. I can't put it at slobber knocker just because it doesn't last long enough, but it's one of the most action-packed fights you'll ever see in your life, so I have to put it there. Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum, an unforgettable fight experience. And I would be the biggest Izzy fan in the world if we were able to see this version of Izzy more than in just this fight. War-ready Izzy is a different animal. Gastelum was having surprise success on the feet in the first round, won it. I believe dropped Izzy. I don't know if it was scored as a knockdown, but drops Izzy. I think rocks Izzy with a head kick late on in round 4 as well, and then stupidly shoots for a double leg takedown. And then Izzy is turning the tables and having success of his own, piecing up Gastelum on the feet. Crazy exchanges. That spinning elbow that he landed against Kelvin as well. I don't know how Kelvin ate that shit and kept going forward. What warriors these two showed themselves to be in this fight. I love it. Unforgettable fight experience to witness live. Slobber knocker, absolutely. We get Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. A little bit too one-sided for me to put at the very top. But the moment at the end of round 5, I think propels this one. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have put it anywhere above War because it is too one-sided. But I'm going to put it in Barn Burner. This fight is incredible. It is honestly pushing the boundaries of slobber knocker. I just can't quite put it there. Dan Henderson versus Shogun Rua. I'm not going to speak too much on this one. It undoubtedly deserves to be in slobber knocker. This was the fight that really made me fall in love with MMA. I forget if I watched it live or if I watched it after the fact, but I remember being like a 12-year-old kid sitting on my dad's computer watching this fight, completely in awe of the grit displayed by both men here. This fight is legendary. One of the greatest of all time. For sure, like maybe a top 3 fight of all time for me. I love it personally. Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler. I think this was their first encounter. Excellent fight. High-level action. Both men going to complete war with each other. Both men hit like trucks. Not giving in. I love this fight. I'm going to put it in War personally. Incredible 5-round banger. And then we get into Colby Covington versus Kamaru Usman. The classic case of two wrestlers clashing in the middle of the octagon and just resigning to the fact that maybe they cancel out each other's grappling, so let's just go to war. And they went to war here. I love this fight. There aren't too many of those moments where both guys are hurt back and forth and like crazy exchanges, but just very consistent pace where both guys are just peppering each other with shots, capped off by that 5th round finish by Kamaru Usman. I'll put this one in War. I really, really like this fight. Islam Makhachev versus Volkanovski. I wanted to put this one on this list just to represent such high-level MMA, because it is really one of those high-level MMA fights that you don't see every day, right? It wasn't insane where both guys are hurting each other and it didn't really have the craziest pace in the world, but it's one of those fights that you just sit there and appreciate for the absolute mastery displayed by both men. But I'm putting that one in banger. Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev. I think this one deserves to. This is borderline slobber knocker, but I think I'm going to put it in barn burner. Yeah, I'm going to put it in barn burner. The action does slow down in the 3rd, but then it has those crazy moments where Gilbert Burns is landing overhands over the top and just slinging with reckless abandon. That first round was relatively one-sided, though, with Khamzat Chimaev just walking down Burns, lands the jab, drops him, controls him on the ground for the most part, just dragging him around the octagon. And then Gilbert comes on strong, drops Chimaev off the back foot in that 2nd round. That was a crazy moment. And then the moment where he kicks Chimaev in the chest off of his back. Oh man, this fight just courses adrenaline through my veins when I watch it. I love that fight so much. Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira. This one has to be in slobber knocker, right? Surely it has to. It's one of the greatest fights of all time. Surely one of the greatest title fights of all time. The back and forth battle. Glover Teixeira having success on the feet. Yuri Prochazka having success on the feet. Both men making stupid decisions in the grappling department, with the mortal error of Glover Teixeira in the 5th round trying to pull guillotine. Yuri Prochazka getting the back and then sinking in that rear naked choke without even the hooks, finishing him in that 4th round, turning the tables against the odds, really. Even though we all, I'm sure, picked Yuri to win this fight going into it, but Glover, for the most part, was in control of this fight. But Yuri pulled the victory out of the jaws of defeat in that 5th round. And wow, what a moment. What a fight this is. Stephan Bonnar versus Forrest Griffin. I'm going to put this one in barn burner, even though it probably deserves to be in slobber knocker because it is so legendary, right? This was the fight that made the UFC what it is today. So I'm going to put it in barn burner just because it's pretty much just a bar fight, right? There isn't a whole lot of high level technique to appreciate in it, but both guys went to war, and this shouldn't be anywhere below barn burner. This tier list is now getting quite large, so I'm going to have to scroll down. Yair Rodriguez versus Max Holloway. I like this fight a lot. Excellent exchanges on the feet, although there was downtime where Max Holloway became a wrestler all of a sudden, clearly being stifled on the feet by Yair Rodriguez and the threat of his kicks. It is a banger. There were some cool moments in it. It's not the best fight on this list for sure. Not the worst either. Arguably, I think this one deserves to be in banger. I don't think it's as great as some people say it is, but I also love the fight, so I'm going to put it in banger. Matt Schnell versus Suma Darji. Another one, just like Pat Barry versus Chet Congo, that deserves to be at the very top of comeback fights, but maybe lasts a little too short time to be considered top and is one-sided, very, very one-sided. It's a tale of two rounds, really. Suma Darji was peppering Schnell with shots, wobbling him with everything that he would land, elbows around the guard, beautiful shots all around, just displaying high-level striking. Matt Schnell displaying his lack of chin, but supreme toughness, and gassing out Suma Darji with his ability to take shots in that fight miraculously, because I don't know what happened, man, because Schnell gets knocked out by everybody in this fight. He displays some of the craziest display of toughness we've ever seen, turns the tables, starts landing shots on the feet, I believe gets top mount of Suma Darji, lands these disgusting elbows. I remember watching this fight live, and I was sick at the time, maybe with COVID, but COVID wasn't real in the first place, so probably not, probably just the common cold, in all honesty. And I remember having a fever dream while laying down watching this fight, fell asleep before the fight, wake up to Matt Schnell in full mount, feeding him with elbows, and it made me physically ill to witness for some reason. I remember just thinking that I wasn't supposed to watch that. It was too brutal. Suma Darji, I think, reverses him or something, and then Matt Schnell has him in his full guard, sinks in the triangle choke. What a fight. Although doesn't last long enough to be considered anything above banger, but the action was so entertaining. What a fight. I'm going to put this one in banger. This is Chris Lieben versus Sexyama. Another one I think that is borderline war. Or maybe should be in war, actually. No, you know what? No, this is a war. Super underrated fight. Really capped off with I believe a triangle choke win in the third round from Chris Lieben. But both of these men completely gave it all in this fight. If you've never seen it, which I would assume a lot of you guys probably haven't, because this one is lesser known, but it deserves to be represented on this tier list 100%. Both these guys went to war. I'm arguably going to put it a step lower, though, because once again, a bar fight really is all this fight really was. So, I'm going to put it in banger. David Onama versus Nate Landwehr. I think another fight that deserves to be in banger. I don't think it's quite a war or a barn burner, but I do love the fight. I just can't put it higher just because Onama really had nothing left to give after the first round, and it was pretty much all Nate. But then he did have his he did have his moments, even being gassed out the way that he was. But it's a banger. Shane Burgos versus Billy Quarantillo. Very underrated fight. Once again, I'm putting this one in war. I love this fight. Crazy exchanges. Both guys hurt one another in this one. Exchanging smiles in between their crazy exchanges. Just two savages who love their job, really. And I love this fight. It is very underrated, very underappreciated. And I wanted to represent this one on this list. I think it deserves it. Final fight on the list, Jimmy Manoa versus Thiago Santos. Maybe being a victim of how short the fight was, but two absolute Goliaths of 205 slinging back and forth for as long as it lasted. You can't really find as high level action as you found in this fight. Might move this one up to war here just because of that crazy action that you got. Like, seriously, this was prime Thiago Santos being a menace to society. throwing like 2 kicks back to back, and then throwing like a 720 kick for no apparent reason. Wild exchanges, both men hurting each other, chins up in the air, no regard for one another's safety. Oh, it's a crazy fight. I think it deserves to be in war. Watching this fight live, I was enthralled by it, but arguably I think I did put it maybe too high. Was it back and forth? Yes, it was. But I think in the end, this one does deserve to be in war, so I'm going to keep it there personally. And that is the tier list, everybody. I'm going to scroll down, give you guys a good look. Touch butt in the park with that dork with the ponytail. We do have Chet Congo and Pat Barry, as well as Anderson Silva and Chael Sonnen in there. Not many fights I could, with a good conscience, really put in that category. And that's, once again, guys, not to say that these fights in particular are poor, but compared to the rest, maybe they aren't as exciting or as enthralling as the others above them. So let's take a quick little sift through the tier list. There you guys go. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Do you think I rank some of these fights too highly or too low? Let me know in the comments, and let me know any ideas that you have for future tier lists or future videos that you may want to see from me, and I will definitely take those ideas into account. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and have a good one.